Hello and welcome to this continuing journey through the Bible in a year. And today we have an introduction to the book of Haggai, just a couple of short chapters in Haggai today. So we're only going to be spending a day on this. And actually it's only a few more days, I think, until we finish the Old Testament completely. And we start on, I think it's Wednesday of next week, our journey into the New Testament. So if you've been tracking with us so far and you've managed to come through the Old Testament unscathed, then good for you. The Old Testament journey is almost over and the New Testament is shortly to begin. But we're going to wrap up just with three more books. We've got Haggai today, you've got Zechariah, and then Malachi is the last of the books, the 39 books of the Old Testament. So Haggai, you had 10,000 or so Jewish prisoners of war who were taken off to Babylon. That's the context for the passage. A slave labor camp actually in the Persian Gulf. That's where they were taken. And 11 years later, the kind of remaining group, the thousands who survived, as it were, the initial destruction of Jerusalem and of the temple, and were living there for 11 years in the kind of rubble. They were then taken to join them in this labor camp in exile. And Babylon, at this kind of time, they were going to rule the world for about 90 years, which was quite a long time back then for any kind of empire to live. And then they were taken over by the all-conquering kind of Persian empire in the 6th century BC. And then these war kind of torn slaves who were taken from their land, they were allowed to go back to their homelands. And so in kind of waves, the Jewish people were returning to their homeland to go back. And what greeted them, what shook them as they arrived, was the utter devastation. It's like welcome to devastation because of the state that Jerusalem was in, almost completely destroyed. The walls were knocked down. Their capital city was a pile of rubble. The temple, which had been, the glorious house of God, was in absolute ruins. And this was what greeted them. For those of them who could remember, it was so far beyond, what their image of what had been was. Picture that scene, just mountains of rubble that needed to be moved, homes that needed to be rebuilt, stones that needed to be taken out of fields in order to plough the fields, in order to be able to grow crops again, fresh water that needed to be rationed because of there not being enough fresh water for people to drink. It was a bomb site. They had come home and they were living in an absolute nightmare. And it is into this scene, that these next two prophets, Haggai and Zechariah, were coming. They're contemporaries of each other, and they probably would have known of each other. There's a little bit of overlap, but Haggai is the one we're looking at today, the shorter of the two. And it's Haggai's message, really, this kind of 2 chapters, these kind of oracle sayings to this disillusioned, disheartened people that Haggai is speaking. And he's addressing the governor of Jerusalem, who was a Persian appointed governor, but someone who was in King David's line. His name was Zerubbabel. There are some brilliant names in the book of Haggai. So you've got Zerubbabel, and the opening bit of Haggai that you're going to read is saying, really, in all of your desperateness, in all of your wretchedness, you've forgotten God. When things are really, really bad, you've forgotten God and who he is, and what he has done for you and what he can do for you. And so really the first part is kind of shaking them and giving them a motivation. Come on, remember the God of your history, remember the God of the past. Is anything too great for him to do? And then you see in the latter part of chapter 1 that kind of kick up the backside, it motivates them. It motivates them to get the project of rebuilding going. And so in verse 12 of chapter 1, and we got some other good names here. We got then Zerubbabel, son of Shealtiel, and Joshua, son of Jehozadak, the high priest, with the remnant of the people, obeyed the voice of the Lord their God and the word of the prophet Haggai, as the Lord their God had sent him. And the people feared the Lord. Then Haggai, the messenger of the Lord, spoke to the people with the Lord's message, saying, I am with you, says the Lord. And the Lord stirred up the spirit of Zerubbabel, son of Shealtiel, governor of Judah, and the spirit of Joshua, son of Jehozadak, the high priest, and the spirit of all the remnant of the people. And they came and worked on the house of the Lord of hosts, their God. So this message, God's kind of saying, where's my house? You who sit in your fine panelled houses while the house of the Lord lies in disrepair, you all run off home to make sure your house is all right. Where's my house? The temple needed to be rebuilt in the life of the people. Worship needed to be at the centre of the life of the people, and then everything else can kind of find its place. But unless God has a home among you, then it doesn't much matter what else is going on around you. And it kind of makes you wonder, doesn't it? Do we need, as a church, particularly in this nation, a fresh kind of temple raising vision again? Do we need to have that vision that says, unless God is at the heart of things, unless God has made his home at the centre of things, everything else might look great, it might look wonderful and decorated and so on. If the church building might look wonderful, but if God is not at the heart of the community, not at the centre, making his home there in the place of worship, then it all kind of comes to nothing. And where is God seen at work in our communities? And what are the places that we can honour what God is doing? I think the uninterested people in our culture and in our churches at times as well are fed up of merely just words, and they want to see the action of the church lived out. And then there is this kind of call later on in chapter 2 to be holy, to consecrate yourselves. Make sure that no people who have touched dead bodies are going to be involved with the building of the temple, or and there's a list of people there who are excluded. But it's not about it's not a racial picture predominantly. It's not about only Jewish people and clean Jewish people can be involved in that process. If you look at a picture from modern times, it would be a surgical team who are scrubbed up and sterile and ready to go. When they touch the patient, they are not made unclean or unsterile by touching the patient, because they are made clean for the purpose of touching the patient. But if some random person wanders in off the street and kind of comes in without sterilizing their hands and starts operating on the body, that's not a good thing. And so, there needs to be the cleanliness for the purpose, and touching that which is in need of help is not going to make you unclean, because that's the purpose of why you were made clean. But if a random person comes in and contaminates, as it were, that process and that purpose, then that's what the problem is. We need good people, good godly people. This is why we talk about leaders and the importance of leaders, to be godly people, women and men who have consecrated their hearts and their lives for the ministry and the mission of God. And we need those people to be at the heart of what God is building in his church, what God is building in our church and in our community more widely. So this is the great rebuilding effort that's beginning, the motivation of the prophet Haggai, and what can we see as motivating us to put God back at the centre of our hearts and our lives and our church in this age and in this day? And do we need that fresh sense of God's vision as we seek to be a church at the centre of community. What message is God speaking to us through these words? And as you explore that in this day, just this day, I pray that God blesses you in that journey.